Imagine attempting to hop on and control a 1,200-pound, 5 to 6 foot tall animal with nothing but thin ropes and a leather saddle that acts more like a launch pad than security. Crazy, right? Now imagine taking all of your equipment away, all your means of quote-unquote control away. Even more crazy, right? Hello everyone, my name is McKenna and welcome to my first and only podcast episode. Today I will be discussing an inspiring initiative within the horse community, YELO, the Youth Equine Liberty Organization founded by Avery and Patrick Sullivan. What is Liberty, you ask? Well, that is where we shall begin. Horses are complex creatures that have been mankind's helpers for about 5,500 years. While their size, color, and breed vary greatly, each one is special in their own way. Horses are also trained by humans for different jobs, similar to how us humans learn or train to be a certain type of athlete. There are many jobs a horse can do, from pulling carriages to cross-country. The term liberty training was first coined by Carolyn Resnick in 1976, defining it as being, quote, designed to bring a horse a sense of freedom and safety without using any tack, including halters or ropes. Working with a horse in this way will increase the horse's desire to interact and will create a deeper bond and a dependable performance under saddle. Liberty training is designed to develop optimum horsemanship skills and the foundation for any and all equestrian pursuits, end quote. In short, Liberty is meant to create a connection between the human and the horse without using ropes or other equipment. Instead, it focuses on body language, emotion, and a growing mutual trust. Empathy matters. This can look like many different things, from working with your horse on the ground or from their back, to having several horses moving around you in a team. The very notion is incredible. Liberty training, in many ways, mimics horse behaviors out in the wild herds, the human taking the role of the leader. To avoid confusion going forward, at liberty refers to the horse moving or working without equipment, while liberty itself is the discipline. Despite the challenge and positive impacts of liberty, it's not very well known, which is why I want to bring attention to this amazing new program, YELO. Otherwise known as the Youth Equine Liberty Organization, YELO was established in 2022. It is, quote, the world's first recognized liberty organization that focuses on youth and youth at heart, end quote. Their mission is to spend time with horses without feeling the pressure of traditional standards of the horse world. YELO's founders, Avery and Patrick, created this organization to get kids and kids at heart who love horses interested in liberty, teaching them the importance of building a relationship. As Linda Burke, a writer in the journal Society and Animals, puts it, it's about true connection and understanding of your horse. It implies a brilliant relationship, happiness. It is such an emotive journey, and on that journey you take along with your best friend, and they experience it too. I began working with horses back in 2013 at 7 years old. I met my heart horse, Ellie, about a year later. I wanted Ellie to be a show horse, competing in Western and English pleasure and equitation. These competitions focus on the gait of the horse as well as the professionalism and ability of the rider. This type of competition is very common around the country, but very different from jumping or dressage events you'd see in the Olympics. Turns out, Ellie and I weren't made for this kind of work, despite how much I wanted to be. I worked for 7 long, difficult years, trying to conform and succeed. Looking back on it now, I realize how foolish I was. What incredible things I could have accomplished if I had just looked at things with a different mindset. Today, I have a very special guest who can speak to the importance and behind the scenes of YELO, Avery Sullivan herself. I met Avery when I was first starting out. She was much older than me, about 16 or 17 at the time, and she became a role model for me. I saw less of her when she went off to college, but years later we were able to reconnect at the last horse competition I ever competed in. It was also the first time I ever saw Avery perform with a horse using Liberty training. We were at the Skowhegan Fairgrounds, participating in a large horse competition that lasted 3 days. The September breeze was still warm, but the leaves had started changing color. The fairgrounds were busy with all the activity. On the last day, there was a freestyle competition in which you and your horse had the optional opportunity to come in and do something fun. Avery took her horse Tess, a previously wild Mustang, and did a routine at Liberty. It was incredible. The subtle movements, human and horse working together as if it was a dance. Avery would move to the left, and Tess would switch directions, prancing around her human in a circle, despite the whole arena to run around in. It was absolutely magical, and I knew that Avery was just getting started. I've already explained a little bit about how I met you and how I know you. Could you just tell the people out there some bit about you, about what you do with horses, about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I started riding when I was 6 years old at a pretty typical barn that did, jumping and different shows and stuff like that. I took lessons for a while, and then a few years in was able to get my first horse. And through that, it just kind of grew and developed, and I learned a lot. And the biggest thing that kind of kept coming up as I was growing up with the horses is, going to horse shows with my friends and trying to, have a horse that was able to do those things. And there were a lot of struggles for me growing up with both my horse being sound and being able to do those things. And then as I kind of grew more into that, also in being able to compete and do the different events and shows that my friends would go to and that I wanted to go with them. So that was kind of the journey when I was really young. And then I ended up when I was, I think, around 17 or 18, kind of stepping back from that path and moving more towards natural horsemanship. And about a couple years after starting that, I was then introduced to Liberty. And that just completely changed my outlook on horses, on horsemanship, and pulled me in a direction I did not expect at all. So after getting introduced to that, I ended up going out and learning more about it. And through that, staying a lot longer than I thought in different learning opportunities and job opportunities. Eventually, the horses kind of became a part of my career as well, which was never really my intention originally. My intention was just to enjoy my time with them and kind of have a regular job as well. But this path led me to kind of working with horses in a more professional sense. Through that, the focus that I was really doing was Liberty and helping horses that had a lot of the times problems, and problems are labeled by people, and that could mean, they have bad habits that they've developed that make them, dangerous to people, or a lot of them were rescues that maybe didn't have any experience with people and had a lot of fear and just really a lot of baggage that they needed to work through. And so as I kind of worked with all these different horses, I learned a lot more about Liberty and developed that, and just continue to just be amazed by it. Throughout this whole journey, I actually met my now husband, Patrick, who his entire life had a dream of starting a youth program. And he did not intend originally for it to be anything to do with horses, because he didn't get into horses in later in life. He thought it would be associated with sports. By the time I had met him, he was pretty involved in the horses, and we kind of joined together with a lot of the learning and growth that we did, and then finally hit the point where we felt like we were kind of ready to try and create that youth program, but now wanted it to be through Liberty and connecting rescue horses and horses that maybe couldn't do other things, and trying to also help kids that maybe don't have access to horses or who don't even know what horses can do and the amazing, power that they have when we're with them. And so that's kind of what led to where I'm at now with working on the nonprofit side and then with YELO, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about already by now.
Where did YELO first begin?
Yeah. So it was kind of a journey and process to get to that point. Originally, the youth program that Patrick talked about when I first met him was simply going to be a youth program, and it wasn't necessarily going to be Liberty based, but it was going to try and connect kids with horses. And originally, he thought that might be through camps or through like more traditional ways that a lot of, I think, youth get connected with horses nowadays. And then as we did a lot more Liberty and we did these different kind of projects with these horses, it became very clear that that was really the direction both of us wanted to go. And there was really nothing else that we wanted to focus on because we just saw how powerful it was both for the horses and for the people. And so it then became, okay, it's going to be a youth program that, is connected and about liberty. And then I think it was probably about a year after we kind of came to that conclusion of just chewing on it and trying to figure out like how are we going to make this work and like looking at different avenues, and a lot of them as we started to dive into them, we're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be really hard to actually bring to fruition, whether it's like we don't have a physical place to do events, or there's all these complications that come up when you are responsible for kids and different things like that. And so we're actually sitting I think at like the dinner table with a friend that's also involved in horses that we've known for a while, and it kind of just came together in that moment of like, oh my gosh, this is how we need to set it up. We need to make it so that it's connecting people and horses at all different levels, and it's really just creating a community. And once we had that, I had like a pretty strong opinion on, I think we actually need to make it not just for youth. There's so many people who do Liberty who aren't youth, but like feel like a kid when they're doing it. I mean, it's the most magical feeling. I still feel like a kid when I go out and get to like run around with my horse and they follow me around. Like it's just such a special feeling. And it felt like we were missing this whole point of it if we made it so only kids could be a part of it. Because we wanted the focus to be about kids, because kids are so good at just being with the horses, at just not judging themselves, others. The younger you are, the more you don't have these preconceived notions, these past experiences, this fear that you hold on to. And that's what we wanted to focus on because it was so amazing every time we saw kids with horses. But we're like, but we want adults to feel that too.
I know last year you had a few in-person YELO competitions, and then when I volunteered, it was such a completely different environment from anything that I had ever experienced. Did you draw from any of your previous experiences or anything that you disliked from horse shows in the past to create that kind of learning and growing environment for YELO?
Yes, it pretty much, you hit the nail on the head. It was really all pulled from, these are the things that we don't want to recreate, and that it's really easy to recreate, right? Because people don't go into the horse world, the horse industry, or creating horse shows hoping like we want to make this really stressful and really competitive. Like I don't think anyone feels that way at the start, but it's so easy, I think, to get into that mindset when you are at a horse show or when you are running a horse show, that there are winners and losers and there are rules and there are the way things need to be done, and you're being judged. So when you're being judged, there's judgment, and then that judgment crosses over not just from being in the show pen, but then also in the warm-up pen, and it creates this lack of collaboration and support, and I think people to feel more alienated and more cliquey. And we wanted to try and avoid that, but there's also parts of horse shows that I think are amazing and are really good for us. And it pushes it out of our comfort zone. It shows us, okay, where are the spots that I need to grow? Where are the spots I need to help my horse grow? It helps us, just really, develop along our horse journey and set goals. And it also shows us that sometimes it doesn't go how you want, and that's life, and that's okay. And I think there were a lot of values that are still good that you want to incorporate, but the environment that it has created is really not fun for a lot of people, and in turn not fun for a lot of horses. Our goal is, like, we'll call it a show, sure, but this is really a way for you to compete against yourself. It's a way for you to learn, to grow. It's a way for you to meet people who are also in the horse community and who are also doing what you want. With all the ways that we try and set it up, whether it's the classes we choose or allowing, warm up, or, coaching, and just different ways to try and set that up, we're always thinking of that. And I think it will continue to develop, even more as we do more events, because this was still the very beginning. But it really, I think, worked better than we thought it would, in that it did kind of create this place of, like, everyone seemed to be having fun.
What does YELO do? What kind of stuff does YELO engage with or put on? Or
Yeah, so two of the biggest pieces are both the in-person events and the virtual events. The in-person events, we try and do, I would say, 4 to 5 a year, and we try to do them in different locations. In addition to those, we also do virtual events. So we do every month for kind of we call it the show circuit season, which is like March through October. We'll do a virtual show, and the virtual show, much like the in-person events, is all about getting feedback and learning and kind of pushing yourself, setting goals, and figuring out what you and your horse need to work on. So members will kind of choose what classes they'd like to do, and then they actually film themselves doing those classes, whether it's a pattern or freestyle or whatever that is. And then they submit it, and then they get a scorecard back that not only gives a score, but also really focuses on comments and sharing, okay, here's what went really well. And then here are some areas that, could be a little bit better to increase your score. And here are some suggestions on how we might approach, increasing that and doing those things a little bit better. And so we really try and focus on, it's a way to grow throughout the year, not just a way to compete against other people. In addition, we're trying to build and create a community, and we're trying to spread education. And so there's a couple different ways that we do that. One is that we have kind of our herd members, which are people that are members or barns or kind of teachers that are all over the country in different places that we have listed, that we share. And so if there's, someone who needs help or has a question, we want to try and be kind of almost a directory of, like, hey, here's some people we know that do Liberty, or here's some places in your area that we know of. And our hope is to grow that more and more each year as more people do Liberty, learn about it, and kind of learn about YELO. And then new this year, we also started the academies, which we're really excited about, because those are kind of a little bit more formal, a little more structured. It's kind of like clubs. So it's a combination of, if you're familiar with the horse world, 4-H or pony clubs, and then a combination with that of sports academies. So this was kind of coming from Patrick's background of, he was in, growing up doing soccer, he was in these different academies. And so these, local groups would come together, they would train together, and then they would travel around and meet and compete with different academies in the area. And then I grew up doing 4-H. So 4-H, I was in my local club. So I was with my local community. We were doing a lot of different, events and projects. And then we would also go and we would do different shows and kind of compete together against other clubs in the area. And so we tried to combine that, and then also include the education piece. So the club managers are providing practices, meetups, or answering questions, and just trying to help people when they need to, like, film for a virtual show or get ready for an in-person event. And so we have a few different kind of barns and people who are going to in the process of setting up academies for this year. And so I think that's really going to be an awesome way for it to grow, because it's just like naturally what I think the horse industry does. We have a barn, or we have, a group of people that we, work with. And so the more that we can build those and make it a community, then the more people will come into it. And then I would say last big piece that we focus on is education. And so there's kind of options in the memberships where if you just want to kind of be a part of it and be able to compete, then there's kind of a base level. And then we also include a level of membership that provides education. And so we have an educational video series that really tries to cover a lot of different topics of how to get started at Liberty, how to get started riding bridleless, and then gives different tips on how, to prepare your horse for these different classes you might try and do. And so we try and add to that on a very regular basis as well. There's pretty much a new video that comes out every week on different topics. So that's another big piece, is just trying to incorporate the education and have that be the base of everything that we do.
So a lot of stuff coming out this year. Is the future of YELO just spreading it over the world? Like, I've heard Patrick say at least once or twice, like he wants to spread it across the world. And I truly believe that you guys can do it. So is that kind of the goal, or?
That's the goal.
There you go. Got a cameo. Yes, the goal is to spread it for sure. These couple of years have been really just about getting it set up and not focusing too much on promoting, because although we want new people all the time, that's awesome, we also want to make sure that it's set up in a way that really works and is actually providing what we're hoping to provide. 2026, our goal is to really focus on promoting, to focus on growing both the current communities and trying to get to new places. And so there's a lot of different ways that we're hoping to work on that, to do that. And then I think new ways will come up as well as we go through it. We're always thinking about ways that we can improve and trying to see if there are things that we can offer that we're not. But then it's going to be really just focused on growth and just trying to get more people involved and figure out the ways that we can help more people get connected.
Throughout my research, I realized that there is some skepticism around Liberty training, and Avery is the best person I know to dispel some of these concerns within the Horse Society. You and Patrick are very active on social media, sharing your day-to-day work with horses, successes and challenges, as well as encouragement for those starting out on their journey, which is absolutely amazing. You also talk a lot about your rescue horses and how they have grown from being feral to being some of the gentlest and trustworthy horses I've ever seen. When first trying Liberty with your horse, round pens are very useful. In a study from the Journal of Veterinary Medicine, there is a concern about the motivations for a horse to comply within an enclosed space, such as a round pen. Round pens, quote, compared with rectangular enclosures, circular pens have the advantage of no corners. This reduces the possibility of horses stalling or becoming immobile in a corner, end quote. Basically, because of the structure of the round pen itself, horses feel as though they have no choice for escape, heightening their anxiety levels and setting up red flags in their fight or flight response. Round pens allow for humans to be in a dominant position, and it's easy to exploit the horse, even under the guise of Liberty training. Obviously, that is never the intention, but could you perhaps explain how you prevent the unintentional fight or flight response? Or is a round pen always necessary when working with your horse at Liberty?
First off, no, it's not necessary. And we always tell this to people of, you can start Liberty, you can work at Liberty in whatever size, space, location space, like that does not matter. A lot of people start in a round pen simply because, it's small enough that they can actually communicate with the horse. But I think one of the biggest differences, and I absolutely know what you're talking about and have seen it in horses that, traditional maybe round penning or, colt starting or different ways that people approach things, just is about like getting the horse moving, tiring him out, keeping him going. And it does create this kind of like frenzied mentality and increase their anxiety. Whereas the approach that we're taking with Liberty is the complete opposite. We don't want to tire them out. We don't want them to do any more work than they choose to do. And so our entire goal when we go into a session, regardless of the space that it's in, is that we want them to find connection and peace with us. So we want to try and communicate to them in a way that they view us as a part of the herd, and we can actually give them confidence and give them relaxation. The foundation of everything that we're trying to do is creating relaxation with the horses, because if they're not relaxed, they can't learn. And so I think that, yes, that you absolutely, you can do it in any space. It does not have to be a round pen, but also this approach is so different than a lot of the ways that do create those anxieties, and is actually, what we use to try and unravel these horses that have this anxiety or baggage from different training experiences. And it works remarkably well in teaching them self-confidence, and that being with people is actually a positive thing. It's definitely a valid concern, but the entire approach of how we're doing it is to avoid that and be very aware.
So Carolyn Resnick's definition of liberty, which I stated earlier in the podcast, explains liberty training as designed to bring a horse a sense of freedom and safety without using any tack, including halters or ropes. However, I know that you and Patrick have previously explained that it's sometimes impossible. Is it truly liberty, even though you have to use some equipment? And what are some reasons that you'd use some equipment?
There's a couple pieces on that. I think part one is the reality of horses in today's society is they have to live in a human world, right? There are very few horses that are just living on the range, free to completely be a horse with absolutely no human interaction. And even the ones that are, there's a lot of problems with that, because the reality is we are now all over the planet, and horses have to live with us with a certain extent. And so one of the reasons in that, tack is always in some level needed is because horses do need a base level of care that we have to be able to provide to them, right? We have to be able to get them veterinary care. We have to be able to trim their feet, and we have to be able to take care of their teeth and give them that basic care, and be able to move them from one, pasture to the other, so that they're not in a place where they can get hit by a car or something like that. And so there's that piece of it where we do have to use halters at the very least for some situations. And that's okay, because if we're using liberty as a foundation, it can teach them that having tack on is not a negative thing. And they still use that foundation and are still thinking about connection and are still thinking about relaxation with us. And this is just kind of a tool that we sometimes need to help keep them safe and help care for them in the world that we're in today. So I think that's part of tack in different pieces. And then the other part of it is our goal always is to communicate with the horses as clearly as possible. And a lot of the times we can get to the point where we're using absolutely nothing to do that. And that is very often the goal, is that there's absolutely nothing. But sometimes to get there, there are certain things that we can use to help make it clearer to them. So, for example, we'll often use a whip, a stick, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of different words, and it's very common in, the Liberty world. Most people use them, and it's probably one of the most common things that people will make comments on social media if they don't work with horses at all, of like, why do you have a whip? That's cruel, that's abusive. And the entire point of the whip or the stick is that it's an extension of my arm, right? Because we're pretty small in comparison to horses. And so sometimes it's unclear to them what we're asking or what our energy is doing. And so having that stick helps make it clear of, hey, can you please go this way instead of going this way? Or I'm wanting to pet you, but you're not comfortable with me being that close to you yet. So if I have this stick, it's extra long and I can keep my distance and I can give you the space that you need, but also show you that I can approach you and I can pet you and that it's okay. It's not going to hurt you. And so that's really the biggest reason that we would use a tool like that, is just to help communicate with them. And as they understand what we're asking, as we connect more and more, the stick not only gets smaller, but eventually can be something that we don't necessarily need. And I think it's the same thing with riding. When you're really staunchly against, using a certain tack or certain tool, obviously there's certain things that are just not okay to use, and we would not and are cool. But some things we have to adjust and we have to use to help the horses learn, to help them communicate and figure out what we're saying. And I think that our goal is just to use whatever we need to help them understand. But the always we're trying to move away from it and to do less and less and less. And so that's kind of how we view having to use tack.
In September of 2024, I volunteered to work with Avery and Patrick at a YELO competition. It was a sunny day, kids between ages of 6 to 18 milling about the arena, all eagerly braiding, brushing, and pampering their horses in preparation for the day. Fun pop music played in the background as parents and trainers alike talked, laughed, and watched. My job was to be the scribe for the judge, Patrick, writing down his comments and scores for each competitor. It was so different from anything I'd ever experienced at a horse competition. A kid and their horse would come into the arena, able to take their time and get their horse warmed up and connected before starting. Some of the different classes of the competition were fun games like egg and spoon, weaving through an obstacle course, and even jumping over poles. The comments I wrote were positive, encouraging, and offered constructive ways to work on certain aspects going forward. No one was torn down for making a mistake. Smiles and laughter were encouraged if your horse did something silly. It was then that I realized how important this organization is. So, who cares? Who cares? Throughout all my successes and setbacks with Ellie, my family was there to support me through it all. I remember my mom spending hours researching, looking for trainers who could help us. If a program such as YELO had been a thing back then, I truly believe it would have completely changed my life and changed my way of thinking. YELO represents a new leaf that inspires hope for the future of horsemanship. In my attempts to prove that I could make it in this world, I learned a lot of valuable lessons, but took for granted the amazing animal who took care of me through it all. I am reassured by the notion that as YELO gains popularity, people around the country and the world will be able to take part in a program that accepts children of all ages, all skill levels, and all different walks of life, as well as all kinds of horses, from the largest, strongest draft horse to the smallest pony. It's more than just learning how to move your body or do fancy tricks. It's about connection and growing together with your horse as a partnership. A mutual relationship not built on fear or inescapable control, but on kindness and patience. Avery and Patrick's work is going to change so many lives, and I cannot wait to see what they do next.